poor waitress was struggling to survive. Oh, cool. But the moment a billionaire noticed her mother's pendant, her ordinary life shattered, and a secret she never imagined was finally revealed. Emily's life was not the kind of life she had once imagined for herself. Every morning, she woke up to the sound of her cheap alarm clock buzzing on the bedside table of her small, run-down apartment. The place smelled faintly of dampness because the walls were old. The pipes leaked, and the landlord didn't care to fix anything. She pulled herself out of bed, tied her hair back quickly, and put on her faded uniform. The uniform had lost its bright color long ago after too many washes, and though she tried her best to iron it, it never looked neat. Still, she wore it with as much pride as she could because it was all she had. She worked at a small diner at the edge of the city. The neon sign outside flickered so often that people joked the place looked abandoned at night. Inside, the cracked vinyl seats and sticky tables told their own stories. The customers who came there weren't exactly polite either. Some were regulars who liked to bark orders at her as if she was invisible, while others came in with sour moods and left their frustration on her shoulders. Emily worked harder than anyone else. But her manager, Mr. Peters, never seemed to notice. He was a short-tempered man who always wore a greasy apron and smelled of cigarettes. If something went wrong, a missing order, a late plate, a spilled drink, it didn't matter whose fault it was. In his eyes, it was always Emily's mistake. She rarely argued back, even though she wanted to scream sometimes. She needed the job. Without it, there would be no money for rent, no groceries, and no way to keep the electricity on. Still, there was one thing Emily carried with her that gave her strength: the silver pendant hanging around her neck. It wasn't fancy or shiny like jewelry in store windows, but it was precious to her. It had belonged to her mother, the only family she had ever known. Her mother had given it to her before she passed away, telling her, "Keep this close to your heart, Emily. It will remind you that you are never alone." Whenever Emily touched it, she felt as though her mother was watching over her. That particular day began like any other. Something about it felt heavier. The diner was busier than usual, and half the staff hadn't shown up. Emily rushed between tables, balancing trays with hot coffee mugs and plates of greasy food. Her feet ached, her back hurt, and sweat stuck her hair to her forehead. Customers snapped their fingers to get her attention. Some complained their food wasn't hot enough, and others left messy tables that she had to clean before the next wave of people arrived. She kept her smile on, though it was thin and tired. She had learned to hide her frustration behind polite words, because if she slipped even once, her manager would be on her case. Sure enough, Mr. Peters paced behind the counter like a hawk. Whenever Emily passed by, he muttered things like, "Faster, Emily. Do you want the customers to die of hunger? Or wipe those tables better? Can't you see the crumbs?" Her hands trembled as she carried a tray to a group of young men in the corner booth. They were loud, laughing at jokes that only made sense to them. When she set down the drinks, one of them smirked and said, "Took you long enough. Did you walk here from the farm?" The others laughed, and Emily felt her cheeks burn. She forced a smile, nodded politely, hurried away before they could say more. The lunch rush stretched on endlessly, and Emily barely had time to breathe. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten breakfast, but she ignored it. At one point, she stopped for just a moment near the kitchen door to catch her breath, clutching her pendant for comfort. That small pause was enough to draw Mr. Peters' sharp voice from across the room. "Emily, don't stand around daydreaming. Get back to work." She bit her lip, swallowed her frustration, and kept going. But things only got worse. A middle-aged woman at one of the tables complained that her soup was cold. Emily apologized and rushed it back to the kitchen, but the cook growled at her, saying it wasn't his fault. By the time the soup was reheated, the woman was furious. She left without paying, slamming her chair against the floor. Mr. Peters stormed out of the kitchen, red-faced. What happened there? He demanded in front of everyone. Emily tried to explain, but he cut her off. "Don't give me excuses. This is the third time this week a customer's walked out angry. I can't afford your mistakes." Her throat tightened. It wasn't her fault, but she knew arguing would make things worse. She lowered her eyes, murmuring, "I'm sorry." The rest of the shift passed in a blur of noise, clattering dishes, and endless scolding. Emily felt like she was drowning, trying to keep everyone satisfied while her own strength was slipping away. She thought of her mother, of the words she used to say, "You're stronger than you think." Emily. But right then, she didn't feel strong at all. Finally. Near the end of her shift, the loud group of young men called her over again. They had finished their meals and were ready to leave. One of them dropped a handful of coins onto the table and sneered, "Here's your tip. Don't spend it all in one place." The others burst out laughing. Emily's face burned with humiliation as she picked up the coins, her hands shaking. She wanted to cry, but she held it in, whispering, "Thank you," before walking away quickly. Mr. Peters saw the scene and shook his head. "Pathetic," he muttered loud enough for her to hear. That was the final crack in her composure. She had done nothing wrong, yet all day she had been treated like she was worthless. As she set down her last tray in the kitchen, Mr. Peters approached her with a scowl. "Emily, this isn't working out. You're too slow, too clumsy, and customers keep complaining. I can't keep covering for you. You're fired." The words hit her like a blow. Fired, just like that. She stared at him, her mouth open, but no words came out. Her hands went cold and her pendant pressed heavily against her chest, as if it were weighing her down. She wanted to protest, to tell him she worked harder than anyone else there, that it wasn't fair. But all she managed to whisper was, "Please, I need this job." Mr. Peters turned away, already uninterested. "I need workers who don't make me lose business. Clean out your locker and get out." Her eyes blurred with tears as she walked to the back room. She changed out of her stained uniform, folded it neatly, and placed it on the bench, even though no one cared. She took one last look at the diner she had poured so many hours into, then left through the back door. The cold evening air hit her face, mixing with the hot tears running down her cheeks. On the street outside, cars zoomed by, their drivers busy with lives that seemed so much easier than hers. Emily pulled her jacket tight around her and gripped her pendant in her fist. "What do I do now, Mom?" she whispered. She didn't know how she would pay rent that month. She didn't know how she would buy food. All she knew was that she had nothing left, except the little silver locket and the memory of her mother's comforting voice. That night, as she walked home in the dim light of street lamps, she felt smaller than ever. Every step felt heavy, as if the world had decided she didn't matter. But even in her despair, she kept her hand on the pendant. Something deep inside told her that her story wasn't over yet, that this was only the beginning of something she could not yet imagine. Emily stayed in her small apartment for 2 days after losing her job, barely moving except to drink water or stare out the cracked window. The shame of being fired clung to her like a heavy blanket, and the silence of her empty room made it worse. She thought about the rent she couldn't pay, the food she could hardly afford, and the hopeless future stretching in front of her. Each time she reached for her pendant, it gave her a little strength. But even that wasn't enough to silence the fear pressing on her chest. On the third morning, she forced herself to get up. She looked in the mirror, her tired eyes staring back at her. She whispered to her reflection, "You can't give up." Mom wouldn't want you to. It was the only reason she pulled herself together. With trembling hands, she put on her plainest clothes, an old blouse, and a black skirt that was beginning to fade. They didn't look professional, but they were the best she had. She had heard about a job fair being held at a luxury hotel downtown. Dozens of companies would be there, handing out applications and looking for workers. The thought of walking into such a place terrified her. She had never stepped foot in a hotel that grand. But she had no choice. If she wanted to survive, she had to try. The bus ride to the city felt endless. She sat near the window, watching tall buildings rise higher as the bus moved along. When the hotel finally came into view, her breath caught. It was enormous. With shining glass windows that reflected the morning sun and golden doors that looked like something out of a dream, people in expensive suits and polished shoes walked in confidently, talking on phones or carrying leather briefcases. Emily stared down at her scuffed shoes and wrinkled skirt, and for a moment she thought about turning back, but then her fingers found the pendant resting against her chest. She squeezed it tightly, closed her eyes, and whispered, "I have to try." She walked up the steps slowly, her heart thudding in her ears. The moment she stepped inside, she felt even more out of place. The floor was marble, polished so bright she could see her reflection. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the air smelled faintly of fresh flowers. People rushed past her, their perfumes and colognes filling the space. Emily felt invisible. But also, like everyone could see, she didn't belong. She followed the signs to the ballroom, where the job fair was being held. Inside, rows of tables lined the room, each decorated with banners and posters, advertising companies. Representatives stood behind the tables, smiling as they handed out flyers and shook hands. People walked around in neat lines, dropping resumes and making polite conversation. Emily clutched the small folder she had prepared with her resume, her hands sweaty against the paper. She tried to approach one of the tables, but froze when she heard a group of young women nearby laughing. One of them glanced at her clothes, then whispered something to the others. Emily's face burned, and she quickly turned away. She wandered to the far side of the room, avoiding eye contact, hoping nobody would notice how nervous she was. Just as she was about to sit down and catch her breath, a sudden noise filled the hotel lobby outside. People started turning their heads, murmuring with excitement. Emily stepped closer to the doorway to see what was happening. A tall man in a sharp black suit had entered the building, surrounded by 2 security guards. He moved with confidence, and people immediately pulled out their phones, snapping photos and whispering his name. It was Alexander Grant, one of the wealthiest men in the country. His face had been on magazines, newspapers, and television screens for years. Everyone knew his story, how he had built an empire from nothing, how he controlled businesses across the world. He was rarely seen in public, which explained why the crowd reacted like he was a movie star. Emily had never seen him in real life before. She had only ever glimpsed his picture on the news. Something about his presence made the air feel heavier, as though everyone was waiting for his next move. He walked with a steady pace, his eyes sharp and serious. And though people greeted him, he barely acknowledged them. Emily stood frozen, unsure if she should move out of the way or keep watching. Just then, someone bumped into her from behind, and she stumbled forward, almost tripping. She had been holding a paper cup of coffee she had bought earlier to calm her nerves. In her panic, the cup tilted, and a few drops splashed dangerously close to Mr. Grant's polished shoes. Her heart nearly stopped. She quickly steadied herself, holding the cup tightly, and looked up with wide eyes. I'm so sorry," she stammered, her cheeks turning red. For a moment, she expected him to scold her or wave her away like she was nothing. But something strange happened. Mr. Grant had been walking past without a second glance. But the second his eyes landed on her, he stopped. His confident stride froze mid-step. His expression changed from calm composure to complete shock. Emily blinked, confused. He wasn't looking at her face. His eyes were locked on the pendant around her neck. He stared at it so intensely that Emily instinctively touched it, her fingers brushing the silver surface. Is something wrong?" she asked softly, not understanding why a billionaire would be staring at her like that. Mr. Grant didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, and he seemed lost in thought, as if the sight of the pendant had dragged him back into the past. People around them were still whispering, watching the scene curiously, but he didn't care. His eyes were glued to that little piece of jewelry. Finally, his voice broke the silence, low and unsteady, so unlike the powerful man everyone knew. Where did you get that pendant?" Emily blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. It was my mother's," she replied nervously. "She gave it to me before she passed away." Mr. Grant's face paled, and for the first time, Emily saw something almost human behind his sharp features. He looked vulnerable, shaken. "What was your mother's name?" he asked, his tone urgent but controlled. Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. Why did he care so much? Why would someone like him even bother to ask about her? She hesitated, shifting uncomfortably under his intense gaze. "Her name was Sarah," she said quietly. The name seemed to hit him like a thunderclap. His lips parted, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. He lifted a hand slightly, as though he wanted to touch the pendant but stopped himself. His security guards looked confused, glancing at each other. Unsure why their boss had stopped so suddenly, Emily felt her pulse racing. People were staring. She wanted to escape, to melt into the crowd and disappear, but his eyes held her in place. She had no idea what was happening, only that her simple necklace had somehow rattled one of the most powerful men in the world. She lowered her gaze, gripping her pendant protectively. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to bother you." She started to step back, but his voice called her again. "Wait." The word was sharp, but not harsh. It carried weight, a command that made her stop immediately. She looked back, her heart pounding. Mr. Grant's face was unreadable, but his eyes, they were filled with something she couldn't name. Recognition, fear, hope. "I need to speak with you," he said. His tone softer now, almost pleading. "Please, just..." "Not here." Emily's throat went dry. She had no idea why a billionaire would want to talk to her. She wasn't special. She was just a poor girl looking for a job. But the way he looked at her, as if she was the answer to a question he had been asking for years, made her knees weak, confused and overwhelmed. She nodded slightly, too shocked to say no. As Mr. Grant motioned for his guards to give them space, the room buzzed with whispers. Everyone wondered why the richest man in the country had suddenly stopped in front of an ordinary girl and looked at her like he had seen a ghost. Emily clutched her, pendant tightly, her heart racing faster than ever. She had no idea that this moment, this accidental meeting, was about to change her life forever. Emily felt frozen as Mr. Grant led her to a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. Away from the curious eyes of other guests and employees, she could feel the tension in the air, a strange mixture of fear and curiosity knotting her stomach. The pendant she wore, the small silver locket given to her by her mother, seemed heavier than ever, pressing against her chest like it carried the weight of something much bigger than herself. She didn't understand why this billionaire was so captivated by a simple piece of jewelry. Mr. Grant finally stopped and turned to face her fully. His eyes were no longer sharp with the confidence of a man used to commanding boardrooms. They were soft, almost trembling as he studied the pendant closely. This is remarkable," he murmured. "Where exactly did you get it?" Emily's fingers instinctively traced the edge of the pendant. "It was my mother's," she said softly. "She gave it to me before she passed away. She said it would always protect me and remind me I'm never alone." The billionaire's face paled slightly. He blinked rapidly, as though he was struggling to process something from the past. His voice, low and almost breaking, asked, "What was your mother's full name?" Emily hesitated. She wasn't used to being questioned by someone like him, and the seriousness in his tone made her uneasy. "Sarah Thompson," she whispered. At those words, something in Mr. Grant shifted visibly. He straightened slightly, his hands gripping the edge of a nearby table. For a moment, he looked like a man caught between disbelief and hope, as if he had been searching for something for decades and finally stumbled upon it. "Sarah Thompson," he repeated almost to himself. Emily's brow furrowed. The way he said her mother's name, it sounded like he knew her. But how? He was a billionaire, living in a world far removed from hers. He couldn't possibly have known her mother. She had grown up hearing stories of her mother's kindness and warmth, but nothing about someone rich or famous. "I don't understand," Emily said carefully. "Do you know my mother?" Mr. Grant's eyes softened, but they were filled with an emotion Emily couldn't place: grief, longing, and something like regret, all mixed together. "Yes," he said quietly. "I knew her. A long time ago." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The words hung in the air, strange and heavy. "A long time ago?" she repeated. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath and looked away briefly, his gaze distant. "I knew your mother before she had you," he said slowly. "She was someone very important to me, someone I loved more than I can ever explain. I lost her, and I've regretted it every day since." Emily's heart skipped. She didn't know what to say. Her mother had never spoken much about her past, especially about love or relationships. She had been a quiet woman, gentle but private. Emily always assumed her mother had lived a simple life. The idea that her mother had been someone important to a billionaire seemed impossible. It's almost like a story from a fairy tale. Seeing her confusion, Mr. Grant continued. That pendant, it belonged to her. I gave it to her years ago. I thought it would keep her safe. I never imagined. His voice trailed off, heavy with emotion. He swallowed hard, as if trying to hold back feelings that had been buried for decades. Emily's fingers tightened around the pendant. She felt a strange connection to this man, a pull that was hard to describe. He seemed so human now. Not the untouchable billionaire whose face she had seen on magazine covers. You gave this to her? She asked slowly, her voice trembling. Before she had me. Yes, he said, almost whispering. Before she had you. I didn't know what happened to her afterward. I lost contact, and I thought I had lost her forever. Emily felt a lump in her throat. Her mind was racing. This was unbelievable. A stranger, a man who could have anything in the world, was standing here, telling her he had known her mother and had once loved her deeply. And now he was looking at her, studying her as if she held the missing piece of a puzzle he had been trying to solve for decades. Why are you telling me this? Emily asked cautiously. I don't understand why you care about my pendant or me. Mr. Grant's eyes softened. He took a step closer, careful not to intimidate her. Because, he said, that pendant is more than a piece of jewelry. It connects me to her. And now, to you. I need to know the truth about you, about your life, because I think you might be the reason I never stopped hoping. Emily's hands shook. She didn't know what he meant. Me. How could I be? Why would I be connected to something so important to you? He studied her closely, his gaze intense. Because, he said carefully, you remind me of her. Your eyes, your hands, and this pendant. I need to know everything about your mother, about you, because I think... He paused, swallowing hard. I think you're her daughter. Emily's heart pounded. The words echoed in her mind. Her mother's daughter. That meant... Could it really be? She had never known her father. Her mother had always said he was gone, that he didn't want to be part of their lives. And yet here was a man, a stranger in every way, claiming he had loved her mother and that Emily was connected to him. I don't know what to say, she whispered, tears threatening to spill. She felt a mix of disbelief, fear, and a strange hope building in her chest. Are you saying I'm your daughter? Mr. Grant nodded slowly. I believe you are. I've been searching for you for so long. I didn't know if I'd ever find you, but seeing that pendant, seeing you, I feel it now. I need to know for certain, and I want to make things right if I can. Emily sank onto a nearby chair, feeling overwhelmed. She clutched the pendant tightly against her chest, the only tangible connection to her mother she had left. Her mind raced with questions. Could it really be true? Could this powerful, famous man really be connected to her in such a personal, unimaginable way? Mr. Grant crouched slightly so that he was at her level, his voice gentle now. I don't want to frighten you, he said. I know this is sudden, but I had a life with your mother before you were born. I never stopped thinking about her. And now, I think, I have a chance to know you, to be part of your life. If you let me? Emily felt a tear slip down her cheek. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, struggling to survive in a world that never seemed to notice her. And now, in this lavish hotel lobby, a man she had only seen in pictures was telling her that he believed she was part of his life, that she had a place in a world she had never even imagined. I don't know if I can believe this, she said, her voice shaking. It's a lot. I understand, he said softly. Take your time. I just need you to know the truth. You are special, Emily. Your mother was special. And you carry that with you. Emily felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. A combination of fear, disbelief, and something she couldn't quite name. She looked down at the pendant, the silver glimmer catching the light from the hotel chandeliers. It had been her mother's only treasure, and now it seemed to connect her to a world she had never dared dream of. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt hope. It was fragile and trembling, but it was there. She didn't know what would happen next or how her life might change, but she knew this moment had shifted everything. She had been just a poor waitress a few days ago, struggling to survive. And now she was standing on the edge of a story much bigger than herself, one filled with questions, revelations, and possibilities she could never have imagined. Mr. Grant finally stepped back slightly, giving her space. "I want to help you," he said quietly. "I don't expect anything from you except that you consider meeting me again. There are things you need to know, things only I can explain. Will you let me?" Emily nodded slowly, still holding the pendant tightly. Her mind was spinning with disbelief, fear, and cautious hope. "I'll meet you," she said softly, as she left the hotel later that day. Emily felt like the world had shifted beneath her feet. Her life, once defined by struggle and small dreams, now seemed to stretch into something vast and unknown. And though she didn't yet understand how or why, she knew that the pendant around her neck, the simple silver locket from her mother, had just changed everything. Emily could barely sleep that night. Her mind kept replaying the encounter with Mr. Grant, the way his eyes had widened at the sight of her pendant. The urgency in his voice and the words he had whispered about knowing her mother. She sat on the edge of her small bed, the silver locket clutched tightly in her hand, wondering how her life could have turned upside down in just a few days. Everything felt unreal, like she had stepped into someone else's story by accident. The next morning, she received a text message from Mr. Grant, inviting her to meet him at a quiet cafe near the city park. Her hands shook as she read the message. The cafe was modest, not as grand as the hotel, but it had a calm, welcoming atmosphere that made her feel slightly less intimidated. She spent hours getting ready, choosing simple clothes that were neat but not flashy, and brushing her hair carefully. She kept her pendant in plain sight, as though it were the key to whatever conversation was about to unfold. When she arrived at the cafe, Mr. Grant was already waiting, seated at a small table in the corner. He looked different here, less like the untouchable billionaire she had seen in magazines, and more like a man with a story, with memories that weighed heavily on him. He stood as she approached, offering a polite nod. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Emily sat down, clutching her pendant, unsure of where to start. I still don't understand everything," she said softly. "How could you have known my mother? Why do you think I'm connected to you?" Mr. Grant leaned back slightly, his gaze distant, as if he were remembering something long ago. "Your mother, Sarah. She was the most remarkable person I've ever known," he began. "Years ago, before you were born, I met her. She had a light about her, something that drew people in. I fell in love with her, and for a while it seemed we might have a future together. But life took her away from me." Emily listened, her breath caught in her throat. Her mother had never spoken about love, about the past, about anyone who might have been important to her. And now, here was a man, a stranger, telling her that he had known her mother, loved her even, and that she, Emily, was somehow the link between them. "I gave her this pendant," he continued, gesturing toward the silver locket around her neck. "I wanted her to have something that reminded her of me, something to keep her safe. I never imagined it would end up back with her daughter years later." Emily felt her fingers tighten around the pendant. Her mother had always been careful, private, and quiet. No one had ever mentioned this man before. And now it seemed that he had been part of her mother's life in a way Emily had never known. You knew her before I was born?" she asked softly. "Yes," he replied. "I never stopped thinking about her. I searched for her, hoping to find her, but I lost track of her, and then I lost you too, without even knowing it." His voice trembled slightly, filled with a mixture of regret and longing. Emily's heart pounded. She had spent her life without a father, growing up with only her mother's quiet love. The thought that this man, this powerful stranger, could be connected to her in such a personal way was overwhelming. Are you saying, you're my father?" she whispered, almost afraid to speak the words. Mr. Grant's eyes softened. "I believe I am," he said. "I don't want to rush you or overwhelm you. I just need you to know the truth. I never stopped hoping that one day I would find you, that I would have the chance to be part of your life." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. She had imagined many things about her life being poor, struggling, working tirelessly, but she had never imagined discovering a father who was one of the wealthiest men in the world. A man who had loved her mother deeply and cared enough to look for her daughter. It was almost too much to process. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I don't know what to say," she admitted. "I'm shocked. I never thought my life would be like this. How? How can I trust that this is true?" Mr. Grant reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small worn photograph. He placed it on the table in front of her. Emily leaned forward and gasped. It was a picture of her mother, young and radiant, smiling in a way that made her feel both familiar and strange at the same time. Her mother's hair, her eyes, her gentle smile, it was unmistakably her. And beside her mother stood a younger version of Mr. Grant, his hand resting lightly on her mother's shoulder. Emily's hands shook as she looked from the photograph to Mr. Grant. That's you," she whispered. "And that's her. That's my mother." "Yes," he said quietly. "That's us, many years ago. I never stopped thinking about her, and now, seeing you, holding her pendant, I feel like fate has given me a second chance to make things right." Emily felt a whirlwind of emotions, shock, disbelief, fear, and a strange sense of hope. For years she had felt invisible, struggling to survive, never imagining that she had a connection to someone so important. And now, here he was, telling her that she was the living link to a past he had never been able to forget. She looked down at her hands, clutching the pendant, and felt the weight of her mother's legacy. This small piece of jewelry, something she had always thought of as just a memory of her mother, was now the bridge between her past and a future she had never dared imagine. "I need time," she said softly, tears rolling down her cheeks. This is too much for me to process all at once." "I understand," he said gently. "I don't want to pressure you. I just want you to know the truth, and I want you to know that I am here for you whenever you are ready. You don't have to make any decisions right now. Just let me be part of your life when you are ready." Emily nodded, still trembling. She didn't know what the future would hold, or how her life might change, but she knew that something monumental had just happened. The world she had known one of struggle, uncertainty, and hardship was suddenly expanding into something much bigger. She had a family she hadn't known existed, a father who had searched for her, and a connection to her mother that was deeper and more profound than she could have imagined. As she left the cafe, Emily felt a mix of fear and anticipation. Her life had changed forever in just a few short days. From being fired and struggling to survive, she now faced a future filled with possibilities she had never dreamed of. She clutched her pendant tightly, feeling the presence of her mother in her hand, and thought about the man who had been part of her mother's life, and now part of hers. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. What would it mean to have a father? How would she adjust to knowing someone so powerful and wealthy cared for her? Could she trust him? Could she believe in this sudden twist of fate? Despite the uncertainty, there was a spark of hope in her chest. For the first time in her life, Emily felt that she might not be alone, that she might finally have someone to lean on, someone who had a deep connection to her past and wanted to be part of her future. She walked home slowly, letting the cool evening air wash over her. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, and she thought about how much her life had changed in a matter of days. From despair to revelation, from loneliness to the possibility of family. Everything felt surreal, yet undeniably real. Emily knew that meeting Mr. Grant was only the beginning. There would be questions, adjustments, and emotions to navigate. But for the first time in years, she felt a sense of hope. She felt the warmth of possibility and the sense that, perhaps, life had saved something extraordinary for her at the very moment she had least expected it. And as she held the pendant close to her heart, she whispered softly, "Mom, thank you." It was a promise to herself that she would honor her mother's memory and embrace the life that had just opened up before her, no matter how daunting or unbelievable it seemed. Emily woke up the next morning with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The events of the past few days, the job loss, the hotel encounter, the revelation about her father felt like a whirlwind she could hardly believe. She sat on her small bed, her fingers brushing over the silver pendant that had changed her life. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry anymore. It was a symbol of hope, connection, and a future she had never imagined. Today, she was going to meet Mr. Grant again, and this time, it felt like she was stepping into a new chapter of her life. She dressed carefully in simple but neat clothes, wanting to look presentable without feeling like she was pretending to be someone she was not. She looked at herself in the mirror, her eyes reflecting a mix of fear and anticipation. Could she really face the man who might be her father? Could she trust him? Taking a deep breath, she whispered to herself, "I have to try. This is my chance." The cafe where they had agreed to meet was quieter than the hotel lobby, and Emily appreciated the calm atmosphere. She arrived early and chose a corner table, clutching her pendant and glancing around nervously. The door opened, and Mr. Grant walked in, his presence commanding yet strangely gentle in this small space. He smiled warmly when he saw her, and Emily felt a flutter of nervousness in her chest. "Thank you for coming," he said softly, gesturing to the seat across from him. Emily sat, still unsure how to begin. I'm still trying to understand everything," she admitted, her voice shaky. "It's so much, so fast. I never expected any of this." Mr. Grant nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "I know it's overwhelming," he said, "and I don't expect you to understand it all at once. I just want you to know the truth and to have the chance to make your own decisions about what comes next." Emily took a deep breath and tried to steady herself. "I never knew my father," she said quietly. "Mom never talked about him. She kept everything private. And now I'm supposed to believe that you're him? I understand your doubt," he said gently, "and you have every right to it. I can only show you the truth, Emily. I can tell you about the past, about your mother, about how much she meant to me, and I can offer you a choice to be part of my life or not. The decision is yours." Emily nodded slowly, feeling a mix of emotions she couldn't name. The thought that she had a father, someone who cared about her, was both terrifying and exciting. She had spent her life struggling alone, making every step herself, and now someone from a world she had only seen in magazines was offering her a connection she never thought possible. Mr. Grant leaned forward slightly, his voice filled with sincerity. "I want you to know, Emily, that I'm not offering money or power. I want to offer you guidance, support, and a place in a family you never knew you had. I want to be there for you, not to change who you are, but to help you become the person you want to be." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She had never imagined having a father who would say such words, someone who cared about her life beyond her struggles. She looked down at her pendant, tracing its silver edges, and felt the presence of her mother's love intertwined with this new possibility. I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I've always been on my own. I've worked hard for every little thing. I'm scared of losing that independence, even if I want to believe you." Mr. Grant smiled gently, as if he had expected her hesitation. "You won't lose yourself, Emily. I respect your independence. I admire your strength. I don't want to take anything away from you. I want to help you grow, to give you opportunities you've never had, and to be someone you can rely on without fear of judgment." Emily felt her chest tighten. For years, she had carried the weight of survival alone, never knowing what it felt like to have someone in her corner. And now, here was a man who had loved her mother, searched for her, and found her daughter. It was almost too much to comprehend. They spent hours talking. Mr. Grant shared stories about her mother, about the love they had shared, and about the challenges they had faced. He told her how proud he was of her resilience, her strength, and her determination to survive despite the hardships she had endured. Emily listened, tears streaming down her face, feeling a mix of grief for her mother and hope for the future. As the conversation continued, he gently asked about her dreams, her goals, and her struggles. Emily talked about her work as a waitress, her dreams of finding a stable life, and her fears of never being able to escape poverty. Mr. Grant listened intently, asking questions and offering advice without judgment. He spoke with sincerity, not just as a wealthy man, but as someone who genuinely cared about her well-being. "I want to help you achieve what you've always dreamed of," he said. "Not by taking over your life, but by giving you the tools, the guidance, and the support you need. You deserve more than you've had." Emily felt a warmth in her chest she had never experienced before. For the first time, someone saw her not as a struggling waitress, not as a poor girl surviving day to day, but as a person with potential, strength, and a future worth investing in. She realized that she could trust him, even if cautiously, because his words matched the sincerity in his eyes. Over the next few weeks, Emily began to spend more time with Mr. Grant. He introduced her to people who could help her professionally, offered guidance on managing her finances, and shared experiences from his life that helped her see new possibilities. At the same time, he respected her boundaries, never forcing her into situations she wasn't ready for. Emily learned that having a father didn't mean losing herself fit, meant gaining someone who would support her choices and ambitions. Emily also began to explore her relationship with her mother's memory. She realized that the struggles she had faced had made her strong, resilient, and compassionate. Mr. Grant acknowledged this, telling her that her mother's qualities lived on in her, and that she had inherited the same courage and intelligence that had made her mother remarkable. This recognition gave Emily a new sense of pride and identity, something she had rarely felt in her life. One evening, as they sat together in a quiet park, Emily looked at her pendant and smiled softly. "I never imagined my life could change so much in just a few days," she said. "From losing my job to meeting you, it's like a dream I can't wake up from." Mr. Grant reached out and gently took her hand. "It's real, Emily, and it's just the beginning. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. But you are strong, and I believe in you. Together, we can face whatever comes next." Emily felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this time it was different. It wasn't just sadness or fear, it was a mixture of relief, hope, and joy. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of belonging, a connection that went beyond the struggles she had faced. She wasn't alone anymore. In the weeks that followed, Emily's life began to transform gradually but surely. She found new job opportunities, some of which allowed her to use her skills and ambitions in ways she had never imagined. She started taking small steps toward financial stability, guided by Mr. Grant's advice. More importantly, she began to feel confident in herself, knowing that she had someone who genuinely cared about her and her future. Emily and Mr. Grant also spent time sharing memories and stories, learning about each other and building a foundation for a relationship that had started under the most extraordinary circumstances. She discovered that family wasn't just about blood, it was about trust, care, and being present for each other. He became not just a father, but a mentor, a guide, and someone who could be counted on in ways she had never known. Through it all, the pendant remained with her, a symbol of her mother's love, her past struggles, and the new life that awaited her. Emily learned to see it not just as a memory, but as a reminder of resilience, hope, and the unexpected turns that life could take. By the end of that year, Emily's life had changed completely. She had new opportunities, a stronger sense of self, and a relationship with a father she had never thought possible. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and disbelief, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more hopeful. The simple silver pendant had not only connected her to her mother's memory, but had also brought her to the father she had longed for without even knowing it. Emily understood now that life could change in the blink of an eye. That hope could appear in the most unlikely places, and that family could be found in the most unexpected ways. And as she held her pendant close, she whispered softly, "Thank you, Mom, for everything. I'll make you proud." Her journey had begun as a poor, struggling waitress, but it had become a story of discovery, connection, and new beginnings. Emily knew challenges would still come, but with her father by her side and the strength she had always carried, she was ready to face the future with courage, hope, and a heart full of possibilities.